Hey everybody, today we are talking about buying and selling games on eBay, both the good and the bad. I am going to start with the bad because I know a lot of you have negative associations with eBay, and I like it when you agree with me, so I'm going to try and get you on my side by starting with the negative stuff first. However, I am going to cover some of the positives too, because like with all my topics, I try to provide a pretty balanced perspective and see both sides of things. So with that said, let's get into those negatives I promised. And the first negative thing would of course be people trying to rip you off. Now, a lot of these listings that are way overpriced will just sit there forever and ever because buyers will not bite on them. But still, it's annoying to see them on there, and it's like you know what they're up to. They're trying to catch some sucker and bait them into buying it. What's even worse is that because eBay is something that everybody knows about, not just gamers, there's people who have no interest at all in video games who will see some of these games out in the wild and think, oh, this is probably worth something, and look it up on eBay and then try to sell it for some huge price. And a lot of times these people don't know what they're doing. They'll go onto eBay and they'll see some really high price for it that's totally unrealistic, and they'll think, oh, this must be what it's worth. They don't know about, checking for the actual sold listings to see what games will actually sell for. And, it's just annoying because if they wouldn't have thought to sell it online on eBay, they probably would have just ignored the game. And then that way, there'd be more games for us laying around at, thrift stores, flea markets, yard sales, whatever. Let me tell you something, some of the best sellers I've ever bought from on eBay have been fellow collectors because they actually know the proper going rate for some of these games. And what that usually is looking at the average price that games have sold for and then pricing it slightly below. And that's what I do when I sell games as well, is look at that average price and go just a little bit under so that it sticks out, it looks fair, and it's an attractive listing. But now it's time to talk about some positives, and the biggest thing is just the time that it can save. If you're looking for a very specific game, it can take a long time to try to hunt down some of these games. Looking around, just in your local area. On eBay, pretty much any game you can think of at any given time is going to be on there. Now, as for the price, that's another story, but as far as availability, eBay is pretty hard to beat. And another point that I just want to add on to that I feel like people never really mention is that not only is it easy to find very specific games that you want on eBay, but you can find them in the exact condition you want as well. Say you're out looking in your local area for a game you really want, and by some miracle you actually find it. It could still not be in the condition that you want it in. And being collectors, we're very particular about that. So, that's something to consider. Quick little story for you. I went to a flea market once and I found a guy who had a Sega CD, and I was like, oh my god, it's a Sega CD. Awesome. Does it work? And he's like, oh yeah, it works great. I just used it this morning. And I'm like, all right, well cool, sounds good. How much does it cost? And he says, $20. And I'm like, all right, that's a pretty good price. So I take it home and boom, it doesn't work. Awesome. So of course, when I go back to the flea market the next weekend, I look for the guy. And do you think I found him? Alright, we got back into the negative there with that last story, so let's bring back some positive stuff. Okay, and I actually think this is a good opportunity for me to bring up eBay's money back guarantee, which basically just guarantees that if the seller cannot prove that your package with your game was delivered to you, then eBay will give your money back. And, in eBay's Feedback Resolution Center, they favor hard towards buyers, maybe even too hard. But the point is, if you're buying games, you're covered. Although that doesn't necessarily mean you won't run into some weirdos. My advice for this is to just do all the basic stuff. Check feedback score, write them a message and see how they respond. A lot of times sketchy sellers, if you send them a message, they'll give you a really weird message back. So that's always a red flag. So always message a seller before you buy something. It's just kind of a general rule. I've found that helps if you have any issues or uncertainties at all. Okay, another positive thing, which is that eBay can actually be a tool of discovery. If you do really general searches on eBay for stuff, sometimes you'll run across something you've never even heard of, or maybe something you forgot about and then you remember when you see it and you're like, oh yeah, that thing. So yeah, eBay can be a great tool of discovery. Another thing people don't really think about eBay for is that it actually is a place where you can negotiate on price, even if there isn't a best offer option. I've done this a bunch of times with great success. The key is to ask nicely. Let me tell you, I've gotten some really rude messages from people wanting to buy stuff that I'm selling, basically just demanding a lower price. That doesn't work. You gotta be nice. You gotta charm people. And one more thing that's not necessarily a positive thing about eBay, but I guess you could say more of a defense, which is that eBay is not always the most expensive price you'll find on a game. I've seen rip-off prices at flea markets and even, local shops and all kinds of stuff. Sometimes people will try to sell stuff for more than they should, and it's not just limited to eBay. Now, with that said, I am curious how much all of you use eBay, or if you completely hate it. You're not going to offend me if you hate it. Obviously, I use it, and it's been a useful thing for me, but if you hate it, that's totally fine. I would agree that the best way to get games in an ideal world is going to thrift shops and yard sales and stuff like that. But there came a time, a little over a few years ago where I just could not find anything at all, and it just wasn't worth my time anymore to go out and look, which is really sad. But, eBay, it's not perfect, but you can do some good with it, and, that's how I feel about it. And yet, at the same time, I feel like eBay is at least partially responsible for why there aren't as many games out in the wild anymore. And I'm sure a lot of you feel that way too, so I'd be really curious to hear what you have to say about that as well. So with that, leave your comments down below. As always, I will see ya in the next video.